Edmund McMillen is the creator of Super Meat Boy, The Binding of Isaac, and also he's currently working on a game called Mewgenics. I mean, he's made a ton of other indie games. Those are just a few. I would call him the OG indie game developer, or at least one of them, along with Jonathan Blow, Phil Fish. And man, this conversation was so good. If you want to get into indie game development, this is the conversation to listen to. Phil Fish, John Blow are both very, very outspoken and get in trouble for it every day, all day. Now, Phil, I don't know where he is now.
Yeah, he's not. He's less outspoken and more just out.
Yeah, you're incredibly honest as well. You're like you tell me before the podcast. You're like, hey, I don't want to know the show notes. Let's just go for it. And my question for you is like, is it just a coincidence that the three of you who were part of this OG indie game documentary, is it a coincidence that you're all that way? Like, did they handpick the most outspoken indies to be part of that documentary? Or did that documentary create that? Because you guys got so much attention, probably more than you thought. And it probably hurt a little bit because it's like, you probably got a lot of criticism. I don't know. Did it create that?
I mean, I've always had criticism. I don't think if something that I say or do doesn't get criticism, then I think I'm doing something incorrectly.
Ooh, I like that.
Because I mean, that means I'm softballing it and I'm vanilla, right? I don't want to be that. I don't want to be a normal person. But I think that Indie Game the movie actually started with a shitload of developers. It was going to be a talking head piece where it was just going to be a bunch of people talking about their games. And I think they had like 10 to 12 people. And it was during a time where I was like, all of my peers are getting rich and I have no money. And I'm hustling as much as I possibly fucking can, but I don't seem to be doing enough. And I heard whispers that there was a group of Canadian filmmakers at GDC that were interviewing different people for a documentary on indie games. And I saw it as an opportunity to put myself out there more, and in hopes that I could get more eyes on me, more eyes on my work, and so I can make a living in the future. And so it was an opportunity to just talk, because I felt like I had something to say that was different than other people. And I actually reached out to them after they had interviewed, I think, Tommy, or at least talked to Tommy. Like, all these people were getting interviewed before I was even being talked to.
Tommy was your partner?
Yeah, for Super Meat Boy.
Yeah.
And he told me about him. He's like, oh, there's this, I also didn't do like GDC as much. I don't really like doing those things, but
me neither.
They're stressful.
They wear me out, dude.
They do. Yeah. I mean, it takes a certain type of person to do that. I mean, it's fun when you're in it and you're riding it. It's like you're at a rave or something, right? And then you just hit that low right afterwards and you're dying and you're like, I'll never do this again. And the build up to it sucks. But yeah. So it was going to be this, 10 plus developer piece, no flow, like no story kind of going through it. It was just going to be a bunch of different developers talking about their games, and which was fine. It had been done before, and they came over to my house to interview me about my whole work. I think they focused on Ether at the time, which I had released, and it was nominated for an award at some festival. And they had me talk about that, and I didn't hear from a while. And then they were like, "Hey, are you? We're thinking about focusing on just you for the trailer for the Kickstarter." And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "We're not sure we want to do yet, but I think we want to maybe film the development of your current project, which is Super Meat Boy." And they just put out, if you look it up, like the original indie game movie trailer for the Kickstarter, it was just me talking about Ether. And I think that was kind of their sales pitch for what they wanted to do. And again, it could have still just been a talking head piece, but they ended up filming, the beginning, middle, and end Super Meat Boy development, and that became the thread that kind of went through the movie, and then Phil, and then John. I think it was like we were the development to release arc. John was the veteran who had already released.
Yeah.
It was, and then Phil was the one who was trying to get to release.
Yeah, and he wasn't published at the time, right?
Yeah.
And you had Xbox money. Microsoft money, right?
Well, he had Canada money.
Does that count? Yeah. I heard that's a loan. Hey, sorry to interrupt. We'll get back to the conversation in just a sec. I wanted to let you know below is a totally free little workshop that I created. It tells you how to make gorgeous 2D game art in less than an hour. The cool thing is look, I know how it is. I'm not particularly a genius artist, but anybody with just some understanding of color and simple shapes can make some beautiful 2D art. So while you're listening to the podcast, feel free to just click the link below and enroll in that free workshop. I think you're going to learn a ton. Okay, let's get back to the conversation with Ed.
I don't know.
I've heard you have to pay back Canada if they give you that money.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I think they just give you money. Like they support the arts up there. But okay. You can kill yourself, but you can make really good art. You can make really good art before you do so.
That's right.
You can make killing yourself. You can be funded.
Yeah.
By making killing yourself into an art piece.
And if you fail killing yourself, you get free healthcare. So you can go to the hospital totally free.
Yeah. You just got to wait. You just got to wait for it. So,
That's right. 4 months.
But yeah. I think that naturally they picked the people not only with that in those spots, but also the ones that I guess had the biggest personalities and opinions, maybe.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense. They doubled down on what worked and where the most drama could happen. I even talked to Lisanne and Jamie semi often, and they just sent me a bunch of Blu-rays because I think the Blu-ray edition just came out or is coming out. Mm-hmm. And I remember asking them about Phil, like, do you guys feel like you edited to make him look bad or crazy? And they're like, we cut.
We did him a favor.
Yeah, like they were like, no, absolutely not. We really tried our best to frame him.
By the way, if Phil's listening right now, I want to say, Phil, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to Phil. I don't care who you are. I want to talk to people and figure out what makes them tick. I would love to talk to Phil. I'm fascinated by that.
I've talked to Phil since he faded. And I know he's still making art. And I know he's still Phil Fish. And I know he's floating around in the ether. And I have a feeling that he might, pop back up again.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's all I know. It's been like a couple years since I talked to him.
Yeah. Well, I'm really fascinated by what you just said, because about if you're not getting criticism, you feel like you're doing something wrong. I as a YouTuber, not nearly as much attention as you've gotten, but as a YouTuber, I have gotten negative comments, and Thomas is this and Thomas is that. And like, it sticks with me and it lives in my brain and it never leaves. And I hate that. And I'm curious, like, are you naturally somebody who can take criticism and you kind of enjoy it? Or have you had to learn to be okay with the criticism? And also, what is some criticism you've gotten? I mean,
I've gotten the full gambit of criticism over the years. So criticism is good when it's legitimate. John is somebody that I will call up and say, play my game and tell me what you think. And I know that he'll give me honest, harsh criticism.
Yeah.
I have a few friends that are like that, and they're very valuable to me. I'm very harsh on myself and my work. A harsh critic can be a good thing as long as that you believe the person's opinions are valid. I mean, it's good to kind of blur your eyes and see, like, if a lot of people are saying, this channel is boring, right? Then you're doing something wrong. If it's a large number of people that are generally saying that, like, this sucks, blah, 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 blah. But then I would also question that if there was a lot of people saying it was boring, there's a lot of people looking, and obviously, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something in that too. I mean, you can dissect criticism and figure some stuff out from it, and take what you want, and then, you know, edit as you go. But yeah, I can take criticism, especially valid criticism, and I can admit to where I need to improve. If I'm not being criticized, then it means either no one cares, or I'm so good that I'm perfect, which I know is not true. So I would be scared if people weren't saying something. You know what I mean? And criticism is a kind of like a blanket term.
It is. There's criticism, and then there's critique. Like, that's like, hey, your game is this way, and I wish it was better, blah, blah, blah. But then there's like, did you ever get hate from that documentary and from who you are on social media and your personality, blah, blah, blah? Did you ever get that?
I don't expect people to like me, because I know, you know, I can rub people the wrong way. So, like, I know my personality is not everyone's cup of tea. I think the general hate that I get is my stuff is edgy to be edgy. It's void of artistic value. It's gross. It's immature. They're far and beyond it. I get a lot of The Binding of Isaac would be so much better if somebody else made it. That wasn't me, because really? all I do is dark, edgy humor that is immature and stupid. And
what, does that affect you at all?
No, I mean, I like movies that people say that about. So of course I would make stuff that's similar. And like, it's just not, what are you going to do? Like, there's no way I can appease those people. I get some enjoyment when people are like, I really hate The Binding of Isaac's themes and aesthetics, but I love the gameplay. It's like, gotcha. You bastard.
Wasn't that's the whole point, right? Is to bring someone into your world with a good mechanic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I'm the kind of guy who, and this is exactly who I was. If you were in a class with me in high school, and there was music played by the teacher, I would be the guy who would say, "Hey, can I have a turn? Can I play my music for the class?"
Yeah.
Because I really want to show everybody my world.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing for the most part. Like, I really like entertaining with my aesthetic, with my vibe. Like, I think that a lot of stuff that I like that a lot of people don't like has a great deal of value. And I feel like more people would enjoy it if given the chance.
Yeah.
So I like to put it in front of people. Like, I like to curate. I like to do that sort of stuff. It's just naturally in me. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, like, my games are curations of all the shit that I really like. There's a lot of nods to a bunch of different things that once you dive in deep and start Googling these things, you realize where they're from, and maybe you'll end up listening to some music or watching a movie that you wouldn't normally watch because of something that I created, which is really cool because I really enjoyed those things.
Dude, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't doing this? Like, let's say Super Meat Boy just didn't land, and The Binding of Isaac never came in your brain. What would you be doing right now? And would you be happy?
I would hope I would be happy. I mean, I would be doing some sort of art. I mean, I could definitely see myself. I could be a Meat Canyon, or, you know, Smiling Friends type.
Yeah.
Cartoonist. I could see myself doing that. I could see myself being an Alex Pardee artist. You know, I could see myself doing that. But I chose the stupidest, most long-winded fucking art form that has ever existed.
I was just talking to my wife about this. I was like, I feel like I've just chosen and I also do YouTube stuff, man. So like, and I also teach, and it's like, what am I doing? Like, because I used to do Flash animations on Newgrounds, and I used to make movies, and I used to just do stupid stuff that took me like 2 weeks to make, you know. And then you'd get views, and people would laugh at it, and they'd like it, and it was so instantly rewarding, you know, when I was a teenager and in my 20s. And now it's like, dude, I've been working on this game for 3 years, and this is my third game, and every time I do a game, it takes like minimum 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
And I'm like, why did I choose this path? I mean, I think it's because of money. I mean, it's just that you could build a profitable product, whereas with like short animations, I'm not sure you could do that. At least there's a trick to it.
You can when you roll the dice with games, there's a higher probability of something paying out.
I mean, is there though? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the industry right now. It seems like, so John Blow, he was on the podcast. He talked about this, so I don't feel bad talking about it. Braid Anniversary Edition didn't really land very well. And he talked about how, like, well, looking back, it's kind of obvious why it didn't. It's an old game, you know? But he spent a lot of time and money remastering Braid. Yeah. And 2024 did not embrace the game like he hoped it would.
If I re-released Super Meat Boy right now, I feel like the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. Like,
so
I don't think that it works for those type of games.
A platformer.
I re-released Gish. It didn't fucking
really
care. Yeah, no.
Well, when you say that though,
it made a good amount of money for Alex. You know, the guy that I made it with. Like he needed some money, and we re-released it, and it sold. It sold enough for him to pay rent, and which is good.
When was that? When did you release that?
I don't know, like
the remaster,
4 years ago.
Okay, man. Okay, so the big question here is like I had funding. I've mentioned this on Twitter, so it's it's not like an announcement, but like 3D Realms, my publisher, we're still published. I'm still gonna release with 3D Realms, but our sort of one of our last payments, they were like, we just can't
continue.
We need to cut the budget for, and this is happening across the board with publishers. Yeah. Like publishers are just like, they're getting scared of indies. So my question to you is, number one, do you agree that the industry is kind of weird right now for indies? And number two, if it is, what do we do? What's the solution here?
I think that it was the Devolver boom, which also happened around the same time where Epic was like buying up indies.
Yep.
It was this little behind the scenes gold rush, I guess.
Was that 2015, 2016, 17? When was that?
17, 18. 17.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, dude, it was like all these companies had money coming out of their nose. It was crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was hearing some wacky stuff and I was working with Epic as well, mostly to just kind of see numbers go up.
Yeah, I worked with Apple Arcade. They bought one of my games, and it was like unbelievable the money they were spending.
That's not there anymore. And it is because that, like, I think so. What happens is when there's a big boom of something, and I've seen it happen multiple times, like in the late 2000s, there was this indie boom bubbling up. And that was when like Xbox Live and all that, WiiWare, and they were starting to like being like, oh, indies are an option for the future. A lot of people are talking about it. This is a cool new thing. And for Suits, it's just it's a trend. They see a trend happening and they decide to throw money at it and see what happens. So there's just like a bunch of people that have a shitload of money, which I found were called seed investors and angel investors. And they throw money at these things that it's like, oh, you know, fidget spinners are the new thing, you know, that sort of stuff. For a pocket of time, indie games were this new thing. And I started to just get random emails from these people saying, I want to give you money. And I'm like, okay, you can give me money. And then they would be like, well, you got to do this, this, and this, and play by these rules and do that. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I had people coming up to me and taking me out to dinner to ask me about what I thought about doing a handheld flash game console. Isn't that crazy? And I said,
what?
people are playing these games on their computer for free. So I don't know if that's going to actually translate well. Yeah, like
geez.
I saw stuff that eventually turned into stuff like Congregate and like all these different websites. And it's like this tide, whoosh, it flows over and then it dropped down again. And then it came up again. And around the time where like Devolver was just like taking in shitloads of indies and there were hits that were happening, like Hotline Miami and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people just saw that as, oh, we just throw money at indies. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. Are you're indie? That's cool. That's fine. Like that's the thing. And then they just throw money at it. And some are more, I'm not saying that all these people are idiots, but the vibe for the more not in the know people literally just were throwing money at indies. And it doesn't necessarily translate to profits because it's fucking random and you don't know what it is that's going to happen. Yeah. And I'll tell you another thing. You give indies, and this is no shade here to you. You give an indie money, they'll take their fucking time. And that's the truth.
Yes, they will.
And I think a lot of that happens a lot too. Like you take the wind out of their sails in a lot of the ways. Like you gotta have that struggle in order to really get shit done sometimes.
So a publisher in 2025, a publisher might have a different approach. Like if I was a publisher, and I've thought about becoming a publisher, to be honest with you, if I was a publisher, I would kind of be a control freak.
Oh yeah, but
I would say.
But they're not.
They're not
blind to everything. They're looking the other way.
I would say because it's almost like if it, and I'm not going to do this because it's just, if I was an asshole publisher in 2025 and I wanted to actually get a return on my investment, what I would do is I would say, you got to tell me where the money's going. You got to tell me who your team is, and you got to tell me. And we're going to have like monthly milestone meetings to discuss every freaking thing. Because
but that's a lot of work for you.
I know it is, but I've had so many meetings with publishers where they're like, yeah, we had to cut this project and we had to cut that project and cut this project. And I say, well, why? And they go, well, it just ballooned and scope creep and it just ballooned out of control and we can't keep funding it. And I'm like, well, that's your fault in a way. Yeah. Like you got to keep tabs on who you're investing in.
You have to suffer on the downfall of all these other people that could get this shit together, or people just not doing their jobs. Yeah. No, it's, I have a few windows into the industry, especially large companies. I've seen large companies. I have friends at large companies who are like, "Oh my God, the amount of fucking money that these people are just throwing at nothing. It's just astounding." And I'm thinking like, and I'm still in this mindset, right? It's really hard for me. I'm a cheap person. I grew up poor. I understand what money is. And for me, my success could end at any point and all my money could go away. And that's how I usually like kind of think about these things.
You're on thin ice. You feel that way all the time.
And it's hard for me to hear like, oh, so-and-so publisher gave this pretty green team $15 million to work with. And they spent it all in 2 years and there's no end in sight. And I'm thinking like, I'm thinking like, why aren't you? Well, my knee jerk is, why are you giving me this money to do this? Like, I could do it. I could get the job done, but then maybe I couldn't. But yeah, no, it's
almost like a casino. It's like
there's a lot of money in this industry. That's the reality. There's
even now though.
Yes. There's an astounding amount of money in video games, and there are people in suits that are playing that are rolling the dice and just being like, I'm going to give this company $1 billion because the video game industry makes X billion dollars a year. So I'm going to give $1 billion into this and I'm going to invest in and see what happens. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. There's a lot of money flowing around in the mainstream, a tremendous tidal wave of money. and it just kind of goes nowhere because people are doubling down on all these crazy things. And then when the money dries up, they go, well, I'm not going to take any risks anymore. Like, we're going to do a sequel. Like, we're going to just do a sequel of something that already worked, because that is that's at least guaranteed to recoup whatever we invest in that. Maybe we'll make some money back off of these other things that failed. And this is where indies come in. And this is the fucking Balatro situation here. You need to have these people who are off in the corner over there just doing their own shit because they love to do it, not thinking about money, not worrying about it. Because they're the ones that are going to end up coming up with the next thing that you can fucking clone a million times and make money off of it because it was already established.
Yeah.
But it can be very hard to see that. Like, yes, I feel like if I played that game before it released, I would say, wow, this is really good and it's going to do huge.
But Balatro?
Yeah, this is really clever. Like, this is really well designed, and I can see it winning awards. That said, I played Minecraft before it came out, and I said, I don't get it, and I don't like it.
You like it now?
I get it now.
You get it now?
I get it now. I totally get it now. I totally understand now. I didn't know people would be playing it like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Like, I couldn't envision that. So even with my experience and me talking all this talk and saying all this shit, I've thought about it. Like, well, what can I do to reinvest my money? I could invest in indies. I could invest in what I know, right?
Yeah.
And I could find these people and do whatever else. But it's like, but I also know the pitfalls of all of this, and I don't want to be the bad guy.
Wait, what are the pitfalls? Just that you don't make your money back?
I know that the more chefs in that kitchen, the shittier the food's going to be.
But don't you have to have chefs in the kitchen? Like, most of
you need at least one that is telling everybody else what to do. Two, right. Maybe, sure.
Yeah.
You keep going and it gets fucked up, and then you just have clashing personalities, and you have loose ends that could destroy everything. Like, you've got this, like, it's hard enough for me. So all of the games that I've ever worked on have always been me and a programmer doing all of the heavy lifting. Yeah. And then we contract out a musician or a team of musicians, and a sound effects guy is always like the little extra on the side, right? Mewgenics is the first project that I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do all this heavy lifting. It's completely not going to happen. I need an animator.
Why?
And that animator became because I have kids. Because I have a wife.
I was gonna say, dude, I just had my third, and she's 6 months old. Yeah. And I was dreaming. Sorry to go on a tangent here or interrupt you, but like, I was dreaming 2 weeks ago. I was like, ooh, what about the glory days when I was making games alone? And
where you could just burn through the day, and like,
I was dreaming about it, and then I opened up Unity, and I was like, shit. I actually don't want to do this alone anymore. It's exhausting. And because it's like, you got your kids in the morning, you get them ready for school. And then you sit down, you start working, and you work 8 hours alone on a game. And then you're off, and you go downstairs, and then you've got 3 kids jumping all over you until bedtime. And by the time you're going to bed, you're like, I don't have energy to do another day, of all this work. And so for me, it's like, the solo life, I'm going to probably necessarily have to do it in 2025 just because funding was pulled, blah, blah, blah. And so I might have to grind a little bit, which sucks because like my fourth, I'm going to start my 4th commercial game. It's like, why am I still here? But I will say that I could probably do it for maybe a month, and then I'm going to have to go find someone else to help, because you're right. It's exhausting. It is exhausting.
It's unrealistic at a point.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I didn't like it because it's really hard for me. It has been really hard for me. There's been a series of events that have forced me into this situation. The first was 4 Souls, which was like, I can't draw all of these things.
Wait, Ed, what situation? What are you talking about? What situation?
The situation where I don't do all the work.
I see. Gotcha.
It's not just me and another programmer.
Yeah.
I really want it to be. I really like that. I like having complete control, and I don't like the game of telephone that I have to do with people sometimes, where I have to be like, I have a hard enough time explaining to Tyler who I'm working on Mewgenics with, the vision that I have for the vibe of the game, it's like there's so many little bits and pieces and so much unspoken. There's no words for these things. It's just like abstract ideas and pictures and stuff in my head that I cannot communicate well to him. So I really have to lean on a lot of programmers that I work with to just trust me and just trust that I've got this side handled and I'm going to do it. Now, having to like explain that to another person and explain like why a certain character can't have too much of an exaggerated smile on their face because of all of these ideas that I won't even put in the game because they're just in my head and they don't need to be in the game. It's very difficult for me. And
yeah,
I've struggled with it, but there's also a little bit of magic where I did this thing early in development with Mewgenics where I'm like, I can't do these fucking backgrounds. I can't draw these backgrounds. The style that we're going for, it's just not going to work. I'm going to have to hire some people. And I hired 2 different artists, had 2 completely different styles. And I utilized one for these painterly backgrounds, these like more realistic painterly ones. And then one for these more cartoony, exaggerated 30s to 50s background, cartoon style ones.
Yeah.
And what I would do is I would give them both information about these different worlds and parts of the game. And I would give them, I do this similar to music too. I give them a lot of adjectives. I give them a lot of feelings. I give them a lot of weird ideas, and then they just put it together. And when they do, what I've been doing now to kind of get it to let go of my control freakness, it's a volley now. So I throw the ball at them, and then when they throw the ball back at me, there's usually something a little here and there that they put in that I didn't say. And then I pull from that and I throw it to the other artist, and then they throw it back to me, and then I throw it to the musician. And it's just like, there's been a lot of little bits and pieces that I didn't necessarily come up with, but somebody else interpreted from my words.
It sounds expensive. It's like, it's all this time being spent sort of discovering. It's almost like an archaeological dig, right?
Well, I'm not spending it. And I spent 2 seconds thinking about it, and then I move on to the next thing.
Do your team members ever feel like you're not taking their work seriously? Because it's like, they give you something, and then you say, I don't really like that, and you toss it.
I don't toss it. I'm not saying I toss it. I'm saying they put some element of themselves, or they translate my idea in a way that is not correct with my brain.
Yep.
But interesting. So I'm able to then retranslate that back into the game and then throw it back to another artist abstractly, who then throws it back. I'm trying to think of like a good example. What one would be, this is a very bland example, but so Matthias was doing these different bits for this radio station for the game. There's a radio that randomly plays, and it's fully randomly generated. Cool. So like when the DJ says like, "Oh, next up is going to be Black Pussy," whatever it is. It's a song. And he does his little bit. There's like 10 of those variants of the intro to Black Pussy. And then there's outros to it where he does a little, 10 different comments on that too. So every time that song plays, there's some new spice to it that feels like this. It's whatever. Cool. And I had him do a series of like kind of prank call bits and stuff. And there was one prank call where I'm like, oh, I really like that it sounds like you can hear somebody on the phone and they're outside and there's cars going by and stuff. Yep. And it reminded me of like a man on the street doing like, oh, it would be cool to have like man on the street radio guy come in or whatever to say some nonsense about what's happening. Like there's been a disaster in Boone County or whatever else. And I'm like, oh, I know I know this guy who was like my personal hero. His name's Carl Edge, and he made a show called Fishmasters, which was this indie TV show in the Bay Area. And I called him up and I was like, would you, he had this character called Jimmy the Hammer Valentine, who was an ex porn star who did,
It's a show from the 90s, by the way, 1993.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. I'm looking it up right
Who
now.
also did the voice of like a My Little Pony character or something that's part of the lore. But
That's hilarious. This is so niche, by the way. I've never heard of this.
Oh no, you wouldn't. It's amazing though. It's phenomenal.
Fishmaster.
And I was like, oh my God, like, would you want to reprise your role as Jimmy the Hammer Valentine and do a few of these man on the street bits? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. So I had him start doing all these bits, and like I was really loose. I'm like, do something about aliens, do something about a disaster, do something about food poisoning, you know, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And he did this 2 recurring themes of Pinky Winkies. He kept saying, oh, Pinky Winkies, there's been a recall, Pinky Winkies store that kids are vomiting out front and dying, whatever. So it was like, he kept saying it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull that into the game and make this a thing.
Yeah.
And then he would also reference, is like, oh, I've got the lav mic from DJ Bill. It's got like crusted earwax on it and also, you know, whatever. I'm like, oh, fucking DJ Bill. It would be cool to have this character that he's referencing. I could develop him a little bit and have there be these like late night DJ Bill segments that go nowhere, where he's just introduced because you've heard about this guy, DJ Bill. I want to turn DJ Bill into a real person, and then he will talk about his canceled show that doesn't exist.
Yep.
And so I asked again him to reprise his role of this DJ Bill,
funny.
and then it's a lot of riffing. I mean, that's what I absolutely love about how I work.
I'm sure all of this was in your game design document, right?
I hate game design documents.
I'm starting to realize, especially with indie titles, it's like there's 2 of us, there's 3 of us. We don't need a GDD. There's no reason to communicate through a document. And also, I think making games. Would you agree that making games is you're discovering it while you make it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
you know, I have a rough idea of like. I think it does the game a huge disservice to tell the game that you know exactly how it should be from the get-go, because that's not true. The game will find itself if you let it, and it's just like raising a child. Like, are you going to force this kid you're going to fucking play football, you're going to do this, this, and this? No, you're going to see what the kid likes, and you're going to lean towards the things that they like. Like, and it's the same way with any kind of art projects where like you stay open.
Yeah.
You stay open so you can pivot, because if you can't, you're going to just force this thing into this terrible monstrosity. And it's also going to be not fun to work on. Like you're killing the magic and the mystery of the art, like the artistic side, the abstract aspect of creation. Like, you're killing that. You're stifling it completely by saying this has to be like this as you go. I would love to tell you, like, I have examples of exactly what I'm talking about, because I just pivoted recently almost for a gag because I thought it would be funny. But it's a pretty big pivot. Basically, there's a bunch of NPCs in the game.
Mewgenics.
And at the midpoint of the game, something happens. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this NPC changed completely? What does that mean? That means me having to redraw a bunch of new NPCs and new environments and whatever else. But it was so fucking funny. Like, how could I not do that? And then we talked about, like, well, wouldn't it be fucking funny if we just ran the credits right there, like the game ends? Yeah. And why not? And why not? And like, yeah, it's a lot of that. I mean, that's what is exciting about making things.
There's a conundrum here. It's like a catch-22, something like a catch-22, where if you're financially constrained, okay, so I felt financially constrained this summer. because we had the money to work with from our publisher, and that was what we were going to work with. And so I had a team, and I'm sitting here going, okay, we've got these milestones and we've got these deadlines. There is no budget. There's no room in the budget, and there's no room in the schedule to have fun and play around with ideas. But there's also the other side of the coin, which is when you have a lot of freedom and a lot of money, then suddenly you don't have the hunger and the drive.
Yeah.
And you know about both, don't you? Like that, that moment, like with Super Meat Boy in the documentary, you were just like
where it's wrap it up.
Yeah. And you're just like so tense, and you're so tired and stressed, and you bitterly resent your project. I mean, I don't know if you felt that way, but I feel that way.
I've resented projects. I have in the past.
And it's kind of like raising a child. And it's like, I thought I raised you right, son. And then he's 25 years old and he's in prison. That's the feeling. That's the feeling of building a game that you hate. It's like, it's been 3 years. Why did I do this? But okay, so you've got that. What I'm trying to say is like, there's that feeling of constraint, financial constraint, that actually drives you forward and creates these crazy, awesome ideas that come out of like the ether.
But if you have if you don't have anything at all, then
if you have too much freedom and too much money,
you can just float around forever.
Yeah, you'll just and your ideas will become watered down and maybe boring. And so my question to you is like, a lot of people listening right now, they're probably like, well, it's easy for Ed. I know people probably think this way about you, and it's unfair, but what they'll do is they'll say, well, Ed's super successful, and of course he can dick around and do what he wants.
I was dicking around and doing what I wanted when I had no money and working at GameStop.
Okay, that was really what my question is were you always this way? Is this in your DNA?
Oh yeah, I can't have, okay. And it could just be my personality flaw. I don't think I could ever have a job at a company. I was honest with myself about that very early on. I don't think I could work for somebody else. I don't think I could have somebody tell me what to do. It's very difficult for me. It pains me deeply inside, and it makes me resent people.
Me too.
It wasn't there. It never was there for me to just do that. So I couldn't do it. And my limitations forced me into what I'm doing now. If I'm not being creative and doing what I'm doing, then I'm very unhappy. And if I'm very unhappy, I'm on the verge of not existing. And I've learned at a very young age how to satiate that feeling, how to keep myself happy. And it's not just being creative, it's being a fucking weirdo collector. And there's a lot of things that are weird about me. And I've learned how to give those things what they want in order to give me the juices that my brain needs to function and continue to move forward. Okay. And I just became more efficient at making myself happy, and I learned what I needed, and I did that. And that's it.
Is your happiness directly correlated to having autonomy over your identity?
Yeah, 100%.
Is that true of everybody?
I don't know. I assume not. I don't know.
I think about that all the time, because I think about all my friends who are working jobs, and they tell me to my face, they say, yeah, I hate my job. And I'm like, okay.
I know. That's the most depressing thing to ever
I don't
hear.
get it, but they're fine. They live their life. And they, in a weird way, they're less anxious than I am, because I'm like sitting here trying to run a YouTube channel and build a business and make games. And I'm like frantic. I'm like a squirrel, always trying to find like the next thing. And I'm satisfied. I don't know if I'm actually happy. I'm satisfied in my autonomy, and I feel purposeful. But then I look at all my friends, and they're just like chill, but they say they hate their job. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, what's my problem here? Is it because I'm a selfish asshole and I just don't want to, I don't want to give the reins to a boss? I can't quite figure it out.
I think it's a personality type thing. Some might also say I've learned from having children and passing things on to them and learning things from my wife. I've had a lot of like Usual Suspects moments lately where I'm like, oh my God, me and everyone in my family is retarded. And I say that in a literal, you don't censor that word because I mean it. I'm not saying it like,
isn't that word allowed now?
I don't know. I'm not saying it in a derogatory way. I'm saying it in the literal way of our brains something is not right.
Yeah.
And something is not right in my bloodline, and something is not right in my wife's bloodline. And now we have kids and something's not right.
Like y'all are control freaks about your, it's what you do with your time. Like you need to-
we have things that are wrong. It's called neurodivergence. There are very apparent things. And I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia growing up.
Yeah.
It's strong on my dad's side. My dad, same deal. Also Tourette syndrome. My dad has Tourette syndrome. It runs in my family. I've had tics on and off, but never super bad. Which leans into obsessive compulsive. I have OCD, which my daughter now also has OCD. Mm-hmm. And all of these broken parts of who I am and who my dad was and who his father was, and same thing with my wife and her parents, made this. And this is how I am, and this is how I work. And all the things that are wrong with me is simply what you have here. And it's forced me. It's just forced me into this way of being. It's like, this is how I think. This is how I process. This is why I'm honest. This is why I care. This is, and that's those things. I have a lot of these flaws that come off as eccentricities, and it's just like, a bunch of rocks hit together and created the earth. It's just random fucking happenstance.
Sure. It's like you said something. You said, "What's wrong with me is who I am." It's almost like what's wrong with you is what's right with you. It's like the things that are
right with this, in this world, in this pocket, but in the functional world out there with everybody else, it doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work at all.
Thank God for Newgrounds. Thank God for YouTube and games.
I could never go get a job somewhere. Like I couldn't. I couldn't do it. Like I can't be happy doing a lot of things. Like I'm not able to do it.
Do you feel lonely in the real world?
No, I mean, I have my wife and she's just like me. I have kids and I have curated a friend group of neurodivergent weirdos as well who love playing Magic and, like I've gravitated towards this environment where like I work with programmers, and most programmers tend to be neurodivergent, and I get it. Like I can talk to these people and I'm like, yes, I understand. And I enjoy that personality type. The, emotions down, logic up personality type. I work well with those people, and I work well with artistic weirdos who tend to also be similar to me. And I have a friend group that gravitates obsessively towards a game like Magic the Gathering. And the type of people who play those games.
Yep.
And I'm not saying casually, I'm talking about play those games. We like that.
They're all really popular, attractive people.
Yes. Who have their social shit together, man. They party hard, they love sports, and they're happy working Best Buy 9 to 5.
Did you ever have a phase in your life where you felt like you needed to try and be normal?
Like,
did you ever, like, for example, in high school or your 20s, you were like, maybe I should try. Like, maybe I should try to be cool or like hang out with the normal guys. Did you ever feel that? Or do you just like...
As a kid, and this is going to sound really horribly sad. As a child, I have vivid memories of laying in the bath and wringing out a washcloth on my face and meditating and thinking, I'm washing away all of the weird parts of me and all the bad parts of me. Like I've got to get rid of the way I am because it's not working and I'm causing problems. Like it was a very uncomfortable. I grew up and I did not like feeling how I felt. I found a few friends growing up. I always had like one friend who I was really close to. And of course, they were all the big weirdos and outcasts. And that was good enough for me. One was always good enough. And I never, ever felt the need to try to do anything different because for whatever reason, I always had I had confidence. And I think it's something that my grandma instilled in me. She really believed in me, and without saying it specifically, she would talk about my mind and how my mind is different than other people, but it's good because it's unique. Like, and I have to tell, like, when my daughter comes home from school or whatever else and says, the kids call me a weirdo. It's like, well, it's not a bad thing.
No,
like,
it's not.
Would you, weirdo means different. And why wouldn't you want to be different? And I guess that's just kind of like how I've always thought. It never made sense to me why anybody would want to be like other people. I don't want to be like other people, and I don't want to make things like other people. And I strive to avoid that because I think it's unique personalities, mindsets, art, and that's what makes the world go round. Like that's what people care about. Again, it's the whole vanilla. Like you don't, if no one's saying something and saying, hey, don't say that. Hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Or why did you do that? Or what's wrong with you? And whatever else, then maybe you should, I would much rather I'm more comfortable with people yelling at me and saying what's wrong with you than not saying anything at all.
Yeah. How do you know if there's something in you that should be fixed? Because okay.
When it's not working.
Right. Okay. So there is the first big question here is, are people 100% who they should be by default? Or are there things about Ed that it's like, well, you actually do need to work on your temper or your control, or
I'm constantly trying self-improvement as much as I possibly can.
So how do you know when something is not your forte, it's actually not good, and you do need to quote unquote wash it away?
When I don't leave the house. when my panic attacks make me vomit, when life is unlivable, when life becomes unmanageable, then I know, oh shit, I should probably do something.
So it's basically for you, it's like, it sounds like what you're saying is it's really hard to know until you've hit rock bottom what your actual problems are.
No, because I know what my problems are. It's once it becomes unmanageable. Like you got to dance with the devil a little bit to keep life exciting. You know what I mean? And once you've sold your soul, then you're fucking done. Like it's over. But the devil is alluring and exciting and makes things interesting. So I don't want to lose who I am and all my flaws, but I also want to be alive.
Yeah.
So well, it's the balance of those things. Like,
and it can definitely come at the expense of, well, I'll speak for me. It can come at the expense of my children.
Oh yeah.
When I'm like, but this is who I am. This is who I am. And then who I am makes my daughter cry.
Yeah.
Like Thomas I'm like, my brain is obsessive. So I'm like, it's always going. And there's always gears spinning of how do I do this? And how do I do that? And how do I make that better? And blah, blah, blah. Usually with work. And then I go downstairs and I'm thinking, as I'm going down the stairs, I'm thinking at 5 p.m., I'm thinking, man, I'm so unique. My brain is so unique. I'm so special. And then I get downstairs and my daughter's saying something to my face and I don't hear what she's saying because I'm in here.
Oh yeah.
And that for me, that's sort of my red line, which is like, kids have a way of just bringing out the real problems, the things that are actually problems in your life that you do need to change. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh, they're also really helpful at realizing priorities. Well, I mean, that's basically what you're saying. Like my a lot of my major issues have dropped away because I have to be there for my kids, and you just got to do it. But I mean, the thing that you're saying though is that the fact that you realize that this is what a therapist would tell you. The fact that you take pause and you know that that's happening means that you're a good dad.
Think so?
Yeah, 100%. Because a majority, and I'll say that a majority of dads don't give a fuck, and a lot of them don't give a fuck because their life sucks and they hate their life and they got married too young and had kids too young, and there's a myriad of different bad things that happen. But I would say a majority of dads out there, it's fleeting, like it's just a thought that comes and goes. But you obviously you had kids for you set out to have children, and the fact that they are in your head, because I know that I feel the same way. Like I feel like right now, finishing this fucking game up, which will hopefully come out next year. Once it's done, I'm sure I'll work on a DLC, but I really need to take some time away, and I need to help my kids. You know, I need to be there more for them, and help at the house. You know, things just kind of fall apart when my mind, it's not, you know, this, it's not that I'm working in here. It's that I'm working in here. And that's the bad part. Like, I hate myself when my wife says something to me and I didn't hear it because I was thinking about something about the game. And it's really hard as an independent developer, right? Or an artist in general, to not constantly be living in the project, trying to fix it, you know, trying to problem solve and trying to do X, Y, Z. It's hard to be in the moment. And I used to hear, I got better at that. I've gotten better, but I used to hear that a lot. Like my wife would say, "I need you here with me." And that was like a catchphrase. Like, "I need you here with me." And she would pat my leg. And it's like, okay, let's go back into reality. And in this, it oftentimes feels like my work is my mistress.
That's what my wife told me. She said, you're married to Atmos Games, which is my studio. And she said, you love her more than you love me. And how do you argue with that? I mean, if that's what she's seeing and feeling, and my wife knows me better than I know myself. So it's like, what do you say? I mean, what I have said in the past is, no, I'm not, or you're reading into it too much. But now I'm learning. I'm like, no, yeah, that's probably true.
It's hard. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with this, like, male biology and just feeling like
gathering,
yes, I need to provide. What I'm doing is providing, and you're getting dopamine from providing, and it feels good. So you're doing it, and you feel like you need to do more. You need to do more because you need to stock up for the just in cases.
Well, I'm sitting here going, didn't Binding of Isaac provide already? Like, aren't you know?
Yeah, obviously, I'm not driven by any of that. Like, it is not. Yeah, it is not that. It's weird when my wife will sometimes, you know, she knows that I'm not motivated by that, because I was not motivated by that before we had money. But excuse me. Yeah, no, there's definitely many times where she'll be like, do you really need to jump on another project? But she also knows it's accepting the fact that I do need this. Like, I can't give it up.
No way, dude.
I can't. It's not possible. So I need to find that balance between family and work. And oh my God, I'm envious. Like like Tyler, I'll talk to him about, you know, life bullshit, but you know, he's a single guy, and like, there's no way for him to understand what is going on behind the scenes. But oh my God, I feel a great deal of envy about the freedom to throw your life into something and live it because I used to do it all the time.
I know.
Even though I had a wife, and then she'd always say, like the quote in the movie, like, I only see your back. I'd always just be working. But she also knows that in order for her to be with a happy person that she loves, that I need to be refueled by this.
Yep. No, I think my wife and I have had very similar conversations. We got married really young too. When in fact, I started dating my wife when I was 18 and she was 16. So we met in high school.
Yeah.
And from the start, I think the reason why she fell in love with me is because she sees an obsessive weirdo that has to be fueled by creative control, like being autonomous and creating what I want to create. Because what's in here, it's like I've compared it to something like an insect in my brain, and it's like crawling around in my head. And if I don't get it out into some project, it stays there. The problem is that when you do get it out and you finally launch it on Steam, another one grows.
Yeah.
So, have you ever seen Phantom Thread?
No.
Phantom Thread is phenomenal, and I'm going to spoil it for you if you don't mind. I'm sure you'd love it because you like fringe, weird films, I'm sure.
I haven't heard. The fact that I haven't heard of it, is it's new? It's new.
No, it's old. Phantom Thread, I'm looking it up here. Phantom Thread, and I have a point here, but Phantom Thread is Paul Thomas Anderson is the director, and
what? Why don't I know about this movie?
It's phenomenal, and you're probably going to relate to it so much because the premise is this seamstress is upset. He's like a tailor, and he makes like women's clothes. He's obsessed. He is obsessed with work, and he cannot stop. But he falls in love with this woman.
2017. I mean, this is
it's about 10 years old almost. No.
I mean, it was. I can see now why this was like in the early days of my daughter, my oldest daughter. So I can see why I might have missed this.
Right, you had no time. But anyway, he falls for this woman. The only way that the both of them know, because he's an asshole. So like they fall in love, but he treats her terribly because he's a workaholic. And so she discovers that the only way to get his attention and his affection is to poison his food and make him bedridden for like a week. And then they have a romance while he's sick. And so the ending is, sorry to spoil it, but the ending is she realizes that this is the only way this is going to work. And they accept it. And they go, okay, you are a workaholic. This is your thing. There's no way out of this. You're just too freaking creative. Therefore, I'm just going to poison you every month. And there's part of me that I think my wife, she knows that I need to work on, and I am continually working on being less involved in my head.
Yeah.
And I've gotten so much better.
How old are you now?
I'm 34.
34.
Yeah.
You give it a few years, you'll slow down.
And I think that's what I was about to say, Ed, is like, it's just something about aging. The older you get, you care less. Things aren't as serious. Your projects aren't your baby. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think about my games that way anymore.
I do.
Do you really? I think about them like flings or like side pieces. It's like, okay, I had fun with you. See you later. Get out of my life. Like when I launch my games, I'm like, get out. I'm done with you. But it's not that way for you.
No, it feels more like a child.
Yeah.
And it feels like a tragedy when they leave.
Yeah, man.
I mean, that said, you're talking to the guy who's been working on a game that he did release, 14 years ago, and he's still working on it. And
wait, Mewgenics is from 14 years ago?
No, the Binding of Isaac.
Are you still working on it? You're doing
we just released a free DLC like a few weeks ago. It was online multiplayer that I was involved with.
Yeah. Golly, dude.
And I still have like the Four Souls stuff that I am doing.
Well, to wrap up here, man, can you leave the audience with perhaps, and it's okay if you don't have one, but like a strategy for 2025? Like, because like 2024 was difficult, and I was hoping to get something from you, like advice for indie developers in 2025. that something they can do to not feel like scared? Because it was a weird year. I don't know. Do you have anything?
Yeah. The harsh reality of, if you want to be happy doing this, you need to learn to live very poor and be comfortable with that, and know that you will survive and you'll figure it out, even if you have to take a part-time job or contract work or whatever else needs to happen. Um, you got to be more realistic about your time and what you're doing, and hustle. You can't be scared to hustle, and if hustling isn't your thing, you need to learn it. One of the things that a lot of indies don't, especially people from the mainstream that are moving into indie development, don't realize, and I didn't realize looking into mainstream development, is how many hats an independent game developer has to wear in order to become successful. Somebody in your group, probably you, is going to have to be somebody who seeks out press, figures out what that means now. How do I get my game out there to people? Somebody in the group needs to figure that shit out,
Yeah.
And you need to know if that's you. Somebody needs to be the face. Somebody needs to be the voice. Somebody needs to be the one, and I failed at this, to kind of put their foot down and say, this isn't working. We need to stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are so many aspects of game development that have nothing to do with game development, that are needed when you're an independent game developer.
Yeah.
You just have to be this major jack of all trades, and you need to get as much information as you can about as many things as possible in order to have a chance at being a success.
Yeah.
Or you just roll the dice and you're in the right time in the right place, but not, I mean, that's rare. That's rare these days.
Well, I think about all the games on Steam. There's, how many are supposed to be released in 2025? I think it's something like 20,000. I'm not sure. But I mean, 80% of those games are games made by people who, I'm just throwing this number out there, or I'm making up a random percentage, but 80% I would think are people who don't know how to do what you just said, to do all the things. And
I've worked with many people who not only don't know how, but absolutely will not.
They refuse out of principle.
Refuse. Like I've worked with people, and it's a personality type thing too. I've worked with people who are like, I will absolutely not speak positively about my work because it feels self-serving.
Mm.
And it's just not, they can't do it because it feels like they're bragging about themselves. I have no fucking. It's not gonna. But no, that's a personality type, and it's not an uncommon one. There are people who struggle with that, or struggle with kind of like, they feel like it's boasting, or it's, they're bragging about something, and they can't will themselves to do it, or they simply are scared to talk in public, or or.
You're talking about marketing, right? They refuse to market. I mean, At the end of the day. And so, let's say 80% of those games out there, not only are 80% of the games kind of trash on Steam, but then they don't market themselves. They don't participate in typical business practices. Like, if you want to make money, you got to market the thing. So I guess my point is that I'm encouraged by what you said, which is, look, you've got to grind, you've got to hustle. And what's encouraging about that is only like 10% of the Steam games are going to do that. And so everyone's thinking, oh, there's so many games and everyone's trying to get the money. And it's like, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's just like the barrier of entry is so low on Steam that really you're only competing with 10% of those games. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you really hustle.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of people that come up to me and they're like, hey, I've got this thing coming out, or I'm going to do a Kickstarter for this thing. Can you give me your opinion on it? And the first thing I do is like, well, show me your social media. And they've got no one following them. And I'm like, well, usually you can just divide your social media following and figure out what you're going to sell.
Can you really?
Oh yeah, it's just reality. Like, how else is this going to happen? Like, you need to build a fan base for the fan base to find you, unless you've got a fucking publisher funneling thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars into pushing your game in front of people's eyeballs.
Good luck. Publishers don't market anything anymore.
Yeah. Well, I know Devolver really doubles down on ones that sell, because I see some shit. Yeah. Yeah. If it sells, I mean, yeah, that's the shitty thing, right?
But can you? I mean,
Usually
honestly,
it's
though,
after the fact. Usually it's like, oh, if this thing's already successful, then
Yeah.
we're going to invest in advertising.
I honestly, dude, I don't even blame them. They're running a business. They got families and mouths to feed. So there's part of me that's just like, well, of course you're going to double down on your successful games, you know? So anyway.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I still would love to believe. So this is the reality. A majority of people games out there, it's not that they suck. It's that the bar has been raised. The bar has been raised really, really, really high when it comes to what people will care about. And what people care about is this thing that they don't know exists, that's really exciting, that everybody's playing, that's new. So it's when taking a risk, it's much better at this point in the game to double down on something that's totally out of the box and weird and different than everything else than something that's just like this other thing.
Correct. So don't use Unreal Engine. Is that what you're saying?
You can use whatever the fuck you want. You can make a game with Game Maker and it can be successful.
Yeah. You just need to lean into your weirdness. The things
Hotline Miami and the original Spelunky were made in Game Maker.
Yep. Engine doesn't matter. What matters is knowing what your forte is, knowing what makes you spicy and unique.
Balatro.
Yeah.
Come on. It's a fucking deck of cards. He could have made that in real life, just drawing on playing cards. You don't need shit. It doesn't matter what you're working in. You just have to have a really interesting idea that is expandable, that hasn't been done before, that is exciting and draws people in, has a spiciness or uniqueness or weirdness to it that isn't being given by anybody else.
Yep.
And then you bet on that.
It's easier said than done, though, isn't it? Because people like you, dude, your whole life you've been embracing your weirdness.
Yeah, my whole life I've had failures.
Correct. And so you have the natural skill and you learned it, but you have the skill now of knowing like, hey, that's weird and that's weird about me, and I'm going to use those to make some money and make an awesome game. People listening right now, dude,
I think the key here is, though, I'd like to believe the key factor there is, for me, there was no thought of money and there never was.
I got it.
The only time I ever really thought about money was when I was working on Super Meat Boy, and that was mostly like, I probably shouldn't have them fuck because that's an M-rated game and that's not going to fly. Like, I can't have Dr. Fetus take a shit graphically in this version of the game because that's going to turn people away. That's a stupid thing. I shouldn't do that. Yeah. I made compromises. And I made those compromises for fingers crossed that things would go well. But I bet on something that I really believed in and I thought was really good and people seem to really like when I showed them.
Yeah.
You roll the dice.
Yep. You are a shining example. We'll wrap this up here, but I want to just say you're a shining example of leaning into your messiness and turning it into something beautiful. I think that people listening right now, I just want to encourage everyone listening that what you were made fun of in high school for, or what your parents thought was awful about you, or the things that your brother and sister made fun of you about, they could be your color palette to paint with, right? Like these are.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's once you find your voice, I'm a weirdo, so I gravitate towards weirdos, but it's the weirdos' story. It's that are interesting. Nobody makes a fucking documentary about some random dude who didn't do anything and just thought and acted like everybody else. Like, it's just
You're right. There is no documentary I could think of featuring a normal person.
random. Like, how boring is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sucks. Sucks growing up that way and being a square peg, but a square peg doesn't fit. It just it lives outside of it.
Part of it's the school system. You put all these kids in a big box, and then they feel bad about themselves, and it's like, no, you're great. They need.
I can talk forever about this. Like my oldest daughter is now homeschooled.
We're homeschooling next year. Yeah.
It's the school system does not work for. I'll say neurodivergent brains.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Isn't every brain a little bit neurodivergent? Like a little.
At this point, yes. But I can say that majority of people are still fucking pretty normal and fit right into there.
maybe my devil's advocate here is maybe it's because the school system pressed them into this just frustratingly tight.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of people out there.
No, but this is why everybody goes to therapy, because they finally can break out of the box and say, here are my weird things that I'm all about. And they could tell one person
I would love to believe that, because it makes it easier to be like, well, I'm just one of a lot of people. But the reality is you're incorrect. And there are the majority of people out there are just not like you at all and are completely fine with how everything is. And the things that are inherently wrong with them are usually choices that they made in life.
I see.
But I'm mostly talking about creatives, and I think we're very all similar. Like, I'm talking about creative people, and when I talk about the school system, and when it comes to creativity, I do think that the school system in the United States completely crushes and stifles creative kids.
1,000%.
Out of the box kids and kids that are trying to abstract children, creative kids. It just does not reward them in any way for anything that they're good at.
Yeah.
And it just pushes them down and crushes them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was lucky to have parents. What's so funny is I know your upbringing is actually, it's similar in that we grew up in a religious home. I grew up religious. I'm still religious, but the way my home was, and I don't know everything about your home life, but the way my home was is actually we were very conservative, religious, traditional, but my parents, for some reason, they were like, they loved letting me have my freak flag fly. And so when I was making weird, grotesque games, they were like, this is awesome. Now let's go to church. It was so weird. They loved it.
Are you Catholic, or are you Catholic,
no,
or
Protestant? Protestant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because it would be easy to say with your Catholic, you grew up with graphic imagery all around you at all times, so it's totally acceptable.
Well, I mean, it Protestant, same thing. If you read the Old Testament, it's just full of it.
Fire and brimstone.
Oh yeah. But it's funny. It's funny because, like, you would think that the way I was raised, you would think just on paper that, like, Thomas finally broke free when he went to college. And it's like, no, my parents, they foresaw that. I have 3 older brothers. They foresaw that their 4 sons were weird. And they were like, well, there's no amount of playing baseball is going to help these kids. So they just sort of let us go. And I really appreciate that about them. So, but we weren't homeschooled. We went to public school, and somehow we survived, even though we all have our anxiety and our depression and our OCD in my family. But okay, well, let's wrap this up, dude. Links in the description for what do you want? It's up to you, bud.
I'm on Twitter, which is not called that anymore. Edmund, is it Edmund M?
I don't know.
I think it's Edmund. I think it's Edmund M. I think I'm Edmund M or Edmund McMillen on both TikTok and Twitter, and those are the only places that I'm actually.
Why does John did the same thing? Jonathan Blow. What? Why is it that you guys don't want people to go to your Steam page? I'm just curious. It's just a side.
Because I am more than one thing.
That is a huge note to end on. Man, I wish people you're building a brand in a universe, not a game.
Whatever. I have a lot of projects. I'm not just Mewgenics, but yes, if you feel like you want to, Wishlist Mewgenics on Steam. I was supposed to say that.
Yep.
Saying that does actually matter. I remember arguing with Tyler and being like, no, nobody fucking does that. Nobody, I'm so annoyed by people saying, remember, like, and subscribe, that it's like, I would never even say that. But the thing is it does work. So
Yes, it does.
Yes, Wishlist Mewgenics on Steam. It does help us.
It actually does.
It helps for placement. It does help.
Mhm.
It's Mewgenics, like eugenics, but mew, like a cat goes mew.
And I would say this is the weirdest game. I wouldn't say it's the edgiest. It's the weirdest game you've made.
I would say it is the edgiest, but just people don't realize it.
Oh, I see.
People aren't gonna absorb how fucking horrifically horrible it all is, because they're just gonna accept the world. They're gonna accept that it's a game. They're gonna accept it. They're gonna accept.
Kind of like real life, huh?
There's it's called Mewgenics for a reason.
Yep. Okay. It's a game about breeding cats. It's not linear by any means.
No.
It's very creative, and player has a lot of control in what happens. Correct.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I really like it. I think I personally think it's my best work. Doesn't mean it's going to be the most successful, but I firmly believe that it is the best thing that I've ever worked on.
Okay.
Really, really neato. I also like to point out that I'm actually darker than this guy in real life. I can guarantee it.
What are you talking about?
I look very fucking pale. I'm a dark man. I'm a dark person.
It's all about the lighting.
The lighting. I can tell you meet me on the street. I'm one fourth Mexican. I'm a dark person.
Oh, you're definitely darker than me in real life.
Yeah, I'm dark.
Okay.
This is terrible. This is I look pale, like a pale egg.
It's all about the lighting. It's all about the lighting. Well, that's a great note to end on. You're tanner than me. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Okay. Wishlist Mewgenics below. Ed, thank you so much for this. This was really, really fun, dude. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
All right. I'm going to hit the end recording button here.
It better have fucking recorded.
I know. We'll see. Okay. Hey, let's leave some comments below thanking Ed for his time. That was really, really cool. And again, just wanted to let you know that you can join that 2D workshop below. It's totally free. You're going to learn how to make beautiful character art in less than an hour. The cool thing is you don't have to be talented. That's the whole point of the workshop. It teaches you how to use color and very simple shapes with no talent to make really good 2D art, in particular character art for your indie games. That's it. Okay. Anything else? That's all. Love you. Bye. Cheers.